Welcome to the Inspired Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea De La Cerda, and each week I'm bringing you the latest discussions and news about changes in the landscape of education and entrepreneurship. As a 22-year entrepreneur, corporate executive, business coach, and leader, I mentor a community of change-making men and women to get out of their box and step into their true calling to make the biggest impact on this world. This podcast is all about empowering us all, navigating life's twists and turns, and stepping into the fullest version of who we're meant to be. Most people think entrepreneurship is about creating financial freedom. Some believe it's about escaping the corporate world, and others dream about flexibility, autonomy, or making a bigger impact. But after spending more than 2 decades helping leaders build organizations, and after building multiple businesses myself, I've come to believe something very different. Entrepreneurship isn't just a career path. It is one of the most profound personal development journeys available to us, because every business you build eventually asks one question: who are you becoming? Today's episode explores why entrepreneurship doesn't simply reveal your strengths. It exposes your fears, your limiting beliefs, your childhood conditioning, your relationships with money, your need for approval, and ultimately, your capacity to trust yourself. The business is simply the classroom, but the healing is the curriculum. One of the biggest misconceptions about entrepreneurship is that people fail because they don't know enough. They need another marketing strategy, another sales framework, another social media course, another certification. But after coaching hundreds of founders, I've noticed something fascinating. The businesses rarely stall because of strategy. They stall because of identity. Because strategy is logical, identity is emotional, and emotion almost always wins in the end. So today I want to explore why. Well, starting with my story, if someone had looked at my life a few years ago, they probably would have called it successful. I built a respected career. I led major organizations in marketing and communications, worked with incredible clients, won awards, built businesses. And from the outside, everything appeared to be working, functioning just fine. But inside, I was quietly disappearing. And looking back, I realized that I wasn't building my life. I was building a life that made sense to everyone else and even made sense to the business. But growing up in a conservative religious environment, I learned early that there was a right way to live. There was a right way to think, a right way to lead, a right way to be a woman. Later, in marriage, I found myself questioning my own voice. Like, wait a minute. The right way to live suddenly was feeling maybe that it wasn't fitting. I started questioning myself. I often believed someone else's perspective carried more weight than mine. Then came corporate leadership, a world where I learned to become exceptionally capable, to perform, to over-deliver, to prove my value. And it worked, actually, professionally for a while. But underneath all of that achievement was one quiet question I had never really asked. Who am I when nobody else is defining me? By 2022, burnout forced me to confront that question head on. And not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't avoid it anymore. My life was literally coming apart, and I didn't have a choice except to face that question head on. And ironically, starting businesses wasn't the hardest thing that I'd ever done before. Learning to trust myself was. When I began coaching entrepreneurs, I assumed that I was helping people build companies, helping people grow. And instead, I found myself helping people just untangle their identities. One woman had spent 20 years climbing the corporate ladder. She had every credential imaginable. And yet every time she needed to raise her prices, she apologized. Not because she lacked expertise, but because somewhere deep inside, she still believed that her worth depended on making everyone comfortable. Another founder delayed launching for almost 18 months, not because her product wasn't ready. It was excellent. But she was afraid that visible success would create distance between herself and the people that she loved. I've coached nonprofit leaders who believed asking for major gifts felt selfish, even while serving communities desperately in need of these resources. I've worked with executives who could confidently manage billion-dollar budgets, but froze when suddenly they had to introduce themselves without the prestigious job title. Different industries, different backgrounds, but the same underlying question: am I enough without the external validation? This isn't simply anecdotal. either. The science increasingly supports this idea. Psychologist Carol Dweck's research on mindset shows that people who define themselves by proving their intelligence or competence become far more risk averse than those who see growth as part of learning. And it kind of makes sense. If you need that validation so much, then you're not going to take the risk to fail. But entrepreneurship constantly demands a growth mindset because failure isn't an exception. It's actually part of the process. It's part of what's required of you to do. Research from Gallup has consistently found that a majority of employees worldwide are not engaged at work, suggesting millions of people spend much of their waking lives emotionally disconnected from what they do. And at the same time, Deloitte's global burnout studies continue to show extraordinarily high levels of stress among professionals, particularly women, who often carry both workplace responsibilities and disproportionate caregiving and emotional labor at home. McKinsey's annual Women of the Workplace reports repeatedly highlight another reality. Women are promoted at lower rates into leadership, while simultaneously taking on more mentoring, inclusion work, and emotional support inside organizations. So it's no wonder so many women eventually begin asking, hold on, whose definition of success have I been chasing? Perhaps the business isn't the first act of courage. Perhaps questioning the old definition of success is. Sarah Blakely has spoken openly about her father celebrating failure at the dinner table. Imagine. Instead of asking whether she succeeded or how she succeeded, he asked what she had failed at that week. She credits that mindset with giving her permission to take risks. Oprah Winfrey has often said that every setback redirected her toward a more authentic calling rather than away from success. Howard Schultz grew up in public housing, actually watching his father struggle financially, and his experiences shaped the way he built Starbucks, not simply as a coffee company, but as a company that offered healthcare and stock ownership to part-time employees. Yvon Chouinard built Patagonia around environmental stewardship because his identity shaped his business and not the other way around. Different companies, different industries, different personalities, but the common thread, the business became an extension of healed or healing values. One of the greatest lessons entrepreneurship teaches is this. Your business will eventually become a mirror. If you struggle with boundaries, your calendar will reflect it. If you fear rejection, your sales process will reflect it. If you don't believe your work has value, your pricing will reflect it. If you constantly seek approval, your marketing will reflect it. The business doesn't create these beliefs. It simply makes them impossible to ignore. Neuroscience tells us our brains are prediction machines. They're constantly scanning for safety. If your childhood taught you that love depended on achievement, you may become addicted to productivity. If security depended on pleasing authority, being your own boss can feel really terrifying. If conflict wasn't safe, raising prices may feel physically uncomfortable to you. The business becomes one long series of opportunities to rewrite those neural pathways. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's one decision at a time. I've stopped believing that entrepreneurship is mostly about creating income, actually. I mean, income matters. It's a goal. Impact matters. That's a goal. But underneath all of that, entrepreneurship asks us to become someone capable of holding uncertainty without abandoning ourselves, to make decisions without constant permission, to trust our own judgment, to recover after failure, to keep showing up when validation disappears. That's healing. Here are 5 lessons that my businesses have taught me in the process of this. Your business can never sustainably outgrow your identity. Every revenue ceiling eventually becomes an identity ceiling. 2, confidence isn't built before action. It's built because of action. Every difficult conversation expands who you become. And 3, boundaries create freedom. Every time I became resentful, I eventually discovered I had not communicated a boundary, and that's why I felt that way. 4, purpose creates resilience. Businesses built around identity survive storms better than businesses built around ego. 5, the greatest success isn't actually revenue. It's becoming someone that trusts themselves completely. This week, instead of asking, what should I do next? Ask yourself, who do I need to become to create the life I'm trying to build? Because businesses grow, markets change, strategies evolve, but the person you become, that transformation lasts forever. So if you've been feeling frustrated because entrepreneurship feels harder than you expected, or maybe you're just in the hustle, working harder as a tactic to overcome, but you're not getting anywhere, maybe it's because you thought you were only building a business. Perhaps you've actually been rebuilding yourself all along. And while that work is slower, more uncomfortable, and far less predictable, it's also infinitely more meaningful. Because one day you'll wake up and realize something remarkable. The business you created isn't the greatest achievement. It's the person you became while creating it. Thank you for joining me today on the Inspire podcast. And remember, you don't have to stay inside the life someone else imagined. You have permission to rewrite your story. DM me on Instagram at AndreaDLC_coach and tell me what's coming up for you in this episode. And if you know someone who you think could benefit from hearing this, please share it with them too. Entrepreneurship is one of the most rewarding paths in life, but it isn't an easy one. So let's support each other. How about that? Thank you so much for spending part of your day with me today. And I will see you next week on the Inspire podcast. Take care. Thanks for joining me on today's episode. If you'd like to explore what your life could look like when your business and life are aligned with what you're really meant to do, get a business audit. I'll personally review your business, look at your social accounts, and give you some precise direction on what's working and how to create even more impact and income. Simply go to AndreaDelacerda.com, navigate to work with me, and select the business audit. Again, that's AndreaDelacerda.com, work with me, and then select the business audit. And if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe. That way more content like this can be shared with you as soon as new episodes drop. Thanks so much for joining again. See you soon. Take care.